Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real World Productivity Podcast. I'm Adam Moody, and today I'm talking with Neha Nayek, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of RecruitGyan, as well as many other businesses, but we'll hear about that. And today we're going to be talking to her about her background, her experiences, perfectionism, a lot of topics, but basically so we can get a better look into her approaches to some of these problems and the solutions that have come about as a result. So first of all, welcome.
Hi, Adam, and hi, everyone who's listening. Adam, thank you so much again for having me. This is a real pleasure. I'm so excited to get into the nitty-gritty of it all. And just again, thank you for having me.
Definitely. Well, let's just jump right into it. I want to get everyone on the same page. You know, we had a few minutes to chat and to find out about each other, but let's hear a little bit about you. Could you just tell us kind of about yourself?
Yeah, of course, I would love to. So I live in Houston, Texas, a suburb of Houston, Texas, Sugar Land, Texas, for, I don't know, any of you are listening who have family here. And I have two kiddos. I have a hubby, obviously, and two kiddos, one boy who's 4 and a daughter who's 14 months. So it's definitely a busy household. And professionally speaking, I own 4 businesses. I started my entrepreneurship journey about 8 years ago now. And I started with a recruiting agency. I added a marketing agency, a data analytics agency, and then a pediatric sleep consultancy, which is totally kind of off. But there you have it. And one of the things I'm really passionate about is just women empowerment. So a lot of the businesses that most of the businesses that I work with, I actually donate proceeds to the local women's shelter. And I'm also actively hiring women who are mothers on my team. And finally, I'm actually rolling out a course in a few weeks for women who are working 9 to 5 and want to start their own business. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So that is quite the background. We've got a lot to dive into there. So in terms of time management, running a business, all of that, have you had any formal training, or is it all kind of on the job? I started a business, I better figure this out type of stuff?
Yes, I feel like it was with me definitely the latter. And I've talked to people who have MBAs and they have actual courses on, time management and strategy and planning your day. And for me, really all it took initially was just a piece of paper and a pencil, right? Writing down what mattered, what didn't matter, where I was spending time, where I didn't need to spend time, what needed to be outsourced, what needed to be done in-house, really kind of figuring out what made me happy, not only as a businesswoman, but as a mom, and figuring out where that balance is and where those boundaries are, because sometimes it's so hard to want to do everything yourself and want to take on a million things in a day, but it really is about prioritization and just figuring out what can you do this week to take you to the next level, and what do you have to let go and visit or revisit in a few weeks.
Yeah, that is so important. I'm going to circle back to that. I think what you're talking about there with balance is critical, and it's going to tie into what we're going to talk about. So I do have a question I'd like to ask everyone, though, before we dive into this. What's your normal routine like? It sounds like you've got several businesses, you've got a family. You just so everyone's aware, if you're hearing this in the future, there's I don't even know how to describe it. I'll call it an ice and snowstorm in Texas, right where you're at. So
Yes.
probably dealing with loss of power.
Yep.
But yeah, what does a routine kind of look like for you? You've got so many things going on.
Yeah, for sure. And for people who are in Texas listening to this at whatever date, I hope you guys storm through the storm, because it was a really, really going through hell, pretty much, for the lack of better words. So I start my day at 4:30 in the morning. I hit the gym every morning from 5 to 6. I typically go 4 to 5 times a week. I get home, like the shower, getting the kids ready for school. When they're out the door, then I usually have an hour to hour and a half blocked where it's just me thinking about what I have to get done today. And Mondays usually is about an hour, hour and a half, and then the other days is about 30 to 45 minutes. I think it's really important to shut off emails and phone calls at least from 8 a.m. to 9:30, because once you get into that, sucked into the email chains and sucked into the voicemails and the calls and the Slack messages, you are not going to get done what you really wanted to do. And you kind of get pulled into these other unimportant or low priority tasks, as I call it. And then that can, of course, derail your entire day. And before you know it, it's 3:30, right? So I do that. Then I usually have my client meetings. I have a meeting with my team that work for me, and we kind of figure out what our day-to-day looks like. And then around 4 o'clock, I pick up my kids from school. I try to spend as much time with them away from my phone from 4 to 7 p.m. They go to bed at 7:30. So I think it's really important for me to give them the time when I see them, because they do grow up really fast. And then once they're down for the night, I spend some time with my husband. And then usually I go back in and, finish up some emails or just kind of plan my next day, look at my calendar. And I try to get to bed around 9:30 or 10, because by then I'm just so tired that I just don't want to do anything else. I do try to sneak in some Hulu or Netflix in there when I can, when I'm just trying to de-stress. But that really is what my day looks like. And then weekends, it's really just a lot of high quality time with my kids, with my family. My parents live really close to me, as I just told you earlier. So, hanging out with them and having family dinners and family, just get-togethers and stuff like that. Because I think that's really, you have to be a well-rounded business owner. Otherwise, you're just going to be burnt out emotionally and mentally.
Definitely, 100% agree with that. So focusing in on one of these, you talked about exercising first, coming back, spending time on your kind of a daily review, planning your day. What does that look like for you? Is it like, looking at your calendar, looking at your to-do list? What kind of a daily review do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I always look at my calendar and I know what's coming up. If there's a presentation that I need to prepare for, I want to make sure I have dotted the I's and crossed the T's and make sure that's kind of pretty wrapped up and ready to go. If I have any client meetings that are, initial client meetings where they're interested in my services, I want to make sure I have the presentation ready for them specifically and what they're looking for. But a lot of it, honestly, is also just collecting myself and just figuring out, okay, besides the client stuff and the people that work for me, what do I want to get done in my businesses this week or today even, right? So, hey, I have to do so-and-so by Thursday. What needs to happen between Monday and Wednesday to have that done and ready to go? So it's really looking at the big picture, but also the immediate things that are coming up. So I always like to plan, especially for Mondays, kind of have a like three, I call it a 3-pointer plan, where it's 3 points for each days that I have to get done, and sometimes it can be really as simple as, okay, I have to get my nails done because I have something on Friday. I have a client meeting and I want to look polished, right? Like, you want to look professional, but it's really something as simple as that are like my high to-dos, right? And I think it's really important to do that because every day your priorities shift, but it's really important to have a kind of a focus action plan that kind of talks about from Monday to Friday what needs to be done. And then every morning on Tuesday, I take 30 minutes. All right, I have 4 client meetings, 3 blah blah follow-up calls. I have to send out emails. I have a catch-up call with this client, and just really kind of focusing on what needs to get done. I'm also a big believer on kind of, I don't try to be on my phone as much. Honestly, I'm being more and more aware of it because I did realize that I was getting a little burnt out. And I also, the night before, what I do before I go to bed is just take a quick scan at my calendar, right? I don't want to have any surprises. I don't want to have any shock. A lot of times when you are going through every day, you're like, oh, it's already Thursday tomorrow. Like, I thought it was Wednesday. And it just sometimes happens to us when we're so busy with our personal lives and professional lives. And so one of the things I realized when I started doing that just before I slept is, if I have a creative presentation the next day and I'm like, I really don't know what I'm talking about, and I go to sleep with that, sometimes ideas flow to me when I'm sleeping or, when I'm getting ready for the gym early in the morning. So it's really important to kind of tell your brain that this is what's coming up. And then when you go to bed and you wake up, and then there's less of a shock value to it when you look at it in the morning.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a great habit. And it reminds me of Cal Newport. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the guy who wrote Deep Work, and he's got the shutdown ritual. It's an older article, but it's really funny because he actually says to himself, or he did at the time, something like, I am done for the day, and just saying it out loud after doing a calendar review and getting all his to-dos and looking at it and just saying, okay, if anything else comes up, I just write it down and it's taken care of. But I think that's really important.
Yep.
Well, I've got a little bit of a leading question for you, switching gears here. So would you call yourself a perfectionist?
I will say this. When I first started my business, I am type A. My husband always makes fun of me, right? I plan my vacations to a dot. He's like, vacations are not meant to be planned. And I'm like, no, like, I want to know where we're having breakfast and I want to know what time we're visiting the beach. And I am a perfectionist, but I will tell you this. Over the course of the years, I've realized that perfectionism is actually not healthy for you, right? And I'm saying that because I have struggled with this. I have gone through the mental exhaustion. I'm very transparent about kind of my failures because I think entrepreneurship is not born out of successes but out of failures, and I'm a firm believer in that. And one of the point of failures that I always struggled with, unfortunately, when I started out this journey, was trying to do everything perfectly. And I realized something's got to give, right? Like, not saying that you're going to send over a crappy quality product, but the way you have to do it, do about it. I used to put a lot of pressure on myself, and I still do at some point, but now I'm kind of like, okay, let's take a step back, revisit. And the other thing I've learned too about me is I didn't want to lose control, or I don't want somebody else to do something for me. And I started doing that, right? So I hired an online business manager, I hired a PR person, I hired a social media marketing strategist, right? These things take money, right? And this was not something I could afford up until like last year, because I wanted to make sure my businesses were kind of balanced. I was making a certain amount of income to be able to afford these luxuries. But even if you can't afford that, right, it's really important to just say, if I'm doing this alone, you can't expect yourself to be perfect 100% of the time. And it's funny. Some people define perfectionism, right? I feel like it's a societal expectations, because when we see other people achieve things, automatically the mindset is, oh my gosh, your life is so perfect. We've said it so many times about our friends or family. We say it all the time. But the thing is, to me, I love living in the imperfect now, because when it's imperfect, it allows me to grow as a mom, as a wife, as a business owner, as a friend. And I'm not going to, like, again, go out of my way and just be a horrible mother, right? But it's okay to make mistakes, is what I'm saying. And it's okay to learn from them. And when you put that limitation of yourself, that, hey, I'm not going to make any mistakes, that's really when you make mistakes, and B, you are not able to learn from the mistakes. So it's really important to go in with that mindset of, things are going to happen. Like this week, right, with Texas, we
Yeah.
hadn't had power. I had to move all my client meetings. It's literally total craziness. But I always have to tell myself, hey, there's nothing I can do about this. There's things out of your control. You just plan for next week and you move on. And I think that's kind of the viewpoint I started taking more recently about perfectionism.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that part for me of this is also um, like thinking about content. I deal with a lot of content production, whether it's videos, this podcast, or emails, things like that. And I think about all the time, starting a business years ago, and I was so worried about things. But one, mistakes still happen no matter what. You just work to minimize them. And then two, getting that real world feedback, whether it's a product you're launching, it's an email, right? That stuff is invaluable. And I see it, and this is well known, I think, in the entrepreneurship world, that it's like you see people who are worried about getting the logo right for a year before they start the business. And it's like, okay, clearly that's an extreme example. But I know that
Right.
that happens to all of us. We're like, it's got to be just so. I know how to do this, and it's the rare person who can learn to really give that up and be like, hey, we're going for really good, not perfect, right?
Yep. Yep. That's so important. And a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the, moms group that I'm on, people will say, women will say, oh my gosh, like, I just want this perfect website and I want this perfect blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you could literally have the worst website and still have sales. And it really, what matters to your customers is what you're providing to them,
Mm-hmm.
not so much what it looks like, right? And I don't know, Airbnb, if you saw the very first website that they had, it wasn't really even a website, it was just a HTML page, right? And they're doing so well. And I think it really just goes back to, in your mind, what do you define as perfectionism, right? To me, I feel like when you are imperfect, that's when you're perfect, because you're constantly trying to work on yourself. And if everything was perfect all the time and everybody was perfect that you met, there would be nothing to work on. And I think the world would be a really, really, really boring place to live in.
Yeah, that's one. I like it. Two, it reminds me, yeah, I've been reworking kind of my quarterly planning. And as time goes on, I try more and more to look at like, what are the daily things I can do? Like, my goals need to change. I'll accomplish different things, or I'll be interested, but I want my base, what I do on a regular basis, to stay the same. Like, so bringing this back to the perfectionism, it's like, I want to be doing things instead of working towards some unrealistic perfect goal. And
Yep.
it's like, okay, I want to write 500 words a day. And that was a tough one. It's like, well, I'll go back and delete these words. I didn't like that sentence. And even that, it's like, no, just keep going. And it's a weird habit. So I guess kind of a question for you then would be like, what do you think people should do to strike that balance? And I know this is really personal, but I guess how would you advise someone to balance getting a quality output while not, going too far?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. And the way I always think about it, right? So the first thing is act on it. So if you've heard of the 5-second rule, right? Whatever comes to your mind, act on it within 5 seconds. So I'll give you an example. When I first started my first company, the recruiting agency, where I worked exclusively with startups and helped them scale, I was at a horrible job, right? I just hated my 9 to 5. And I'm gonna be really personal with you. I mean, there was one day when we had a tornado warning and they sent us home early, and I would pray that we would have tornado warnings every day. I mean, that's how bad it was. I was just sick of it. I was ready to go home. And that night I was like, I just have to start my own agency or company or something, because I know I'm capable of this and I don't need to work for anybody else. And then instead of thinking of what the perfect name should be or what the perfect, I just started and I just formed an LLC, and I'm like, well, just see, screw it, you know?
Yeah.
So there's going to be decisions like that that are driven by something that's going on in your life, whether it's intrinsically or extrinsically, right? Whether it's your job, whether it's your kids, whether you got laid off or your husband got laid off and you're like, man, like I really need to do something about this, or whatever that situation looks like to you. And it's going to be different for everybody. And so there's going to be moments where you are given that opportunity and you just have to grab it. And I think that's really important, to grab it when it happens, right? Now, when it comes to clients and, you know, doing anything client facing, I think that's really where that gray area lies of when is it okay to have a good versus perfect output, right? Or perfect product or service, whatever you're offering to your potential clients or customers. And my rule of thumb is I want to over promise and under deliver. Oh, sorry. Under promise and
Under
over
promise, over
deliver.
deliver. Yeah, yeah.
Under promise, over deliver. I'm so tired. So I always go into client calls knowing exactly what they're expecting of me, knowing what I'm expecting of them. And I am really not shy about it. I used to be extremely shy about it. And I think this is where people kind of stumble, right? So they get on these client calls, especially as a first-time entrepreneur, you want to please everybody that you talk to because you want to sell to everybody you talk to. And what I realize is I don't want to sell to everybody. I only want to sell to people who are accepting of what I am supporting them with and who are okay with me not giving them, like, if they ask for 10 things and they're, you know, some people expect 100 when they ask for 10 things, and I'm going to give you 10 other 10 things, maybe even an 11th thing, but I'm not going to go above and beyond. And so that's something that I kind of had to come to terms with and just say, hey, this is what you need. This is what I offer. This is what I'm going to deliver. Let's come up with KPIs and SLAs that match, and then where I deliver. And so when I did that, and when I started doing that more and more, it was fine that I was losing clients initially on the initial calls because they're like, well, we also want this and we also want this. And I'm like, that's not what the terms are here, right? And once you accept stuff that you cannot control or that you cannot do, I think that's when you start performing, and that's when you start attracting the right clients that come to you, right? And I think it's really all about, for you, and this is something I have a hard time because I'm a people pleaser. So I have a hard time with setting boundaries. But once I started setting boundaries, clients were even happier because they're like, oh, wow, like we talked about this 3 weeks ago, you delivered, we want to give you more work, as opposed to, you also told us you're going to do A through Z, but now you're giving us A through F. Like what the heck, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important as first-time business owners to really figure out who your ideal client is and figure out where you want to kind of, you know, the perfectionism, right? And just work with clients that will work with you based on kind of your prerogative and what you want to provide to them. And I think that's really, really important. And unfortunately, that's not something that can be taught in an MBA. That's just something you learn while you work with a few clients, or you screw up and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have worked with this client. Now they're expecting, like, you know, mountains out of me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where I kind of started kind of that self-development process.
Definitely. Yeah. And I always give the advice of, if you're getting started, you're starting a business, whatever it may be. Yeah. Say yes. You've got to try things out unless you have a really clear vision. If you do, that's great. Start saying no. But say yes and then start saying no. And that is super important. And I see that relating to personal life as well. Being really clear, the more clear you are about what you want, right? Whether it's you personally or your business, what your business wants. I'm using air quotes, which of course nobody can see, but whatever your business needs or wants, the more clear you get about that, the happier clients you're going to have. And you're going to just start attracting people. I'm not like a big woo-woo type of guy, but it's a result, right? You get more clarity and things just start moving. So
yeah. And I will say, if you are not good at something, please, and if you have the capacity financially to outsource anything like that, even if you can hire a VA to schedule calls for you or something where you're like, hey, I need to focus on the content part of it. I really don't have time or the energy to start booking calls on my calendar. Hire somebody, right? Especially as you're starting to scale and have you worked with 1 or 2 clients? Because I think that's a lot of holdback too. People don't want to spend money, but it's really you investing back in your business when you do stuff like that, because you're going to now have 3 hours to yourself that you can go back and try to perfect whatever output you wanted to perfect. So it's really important to kind of let go of that control. And that's something I was horrible at, to be honest. I mean, I know people probably like, what? Like, I was so bad at it. I would literally be working all day, all night. And I was like, this is not the life I want. And once I started outsourcing that, even though it costs me, I now see the ROI. And I think that's really important.
Definitely. Well, that's a good thing to bring up, talking about working with others, whether it's outsourcing or someone on your team. How would you work with somebody on the team who maybe needs to work on being less of a perfectionist as well, right? You know, you hire someone, and I know I can only speak from my own experience with this. I would look for someone who is detail oriented. I want someone who's really paying attention. But how have you dealt with people where it's like, okay, we also need to tread that line of, okay, this can't take you 10 hours. I'm paying you for 2. It needs to be done. You know, what's the way through that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And the way I do it is, again, boundaries, right? So we set up the expectation beforehand. If I tell you to write a 500-word page blog article for one of my websites, I will tell you, hey, how much are you going to charge? What does a deadline look like? And I'll tell them I'm okay with like 1 or 2 drafts if I want to edit or something like that. I honestly have been lucky and fortunate to not have anybody been so hung up on it. I have actually had the other problem where people are unfortunately missing deadlines for whatever reason, and or they'll stop responding and just go MIA to requests, whether they get busy or they're just like, oh, this is not my full-time job. So I've kind of had to deal with the other end of the spectrum. But if I were to deal with somebody who is a hardcore perfectionist, that would be a conversation I would have with them. I would, work. And these are the things you're not going to know unless you start working with people. Unfortunately, this is not something that comes across in a first or even second meeting. So if I start seeing that, hey, like, you are really not submitting work because you're having anxiety about it being perfect, let's talk through this. Like, what is your kind of wall that you're hitting? Are you afraid that I'm going to hate your work? Or talk to me through that. Does it help to kind of have outlines put together? Does it help for me to have weekly check-ins with you to see what you're doing, what I can help you with? Again, it's all about setting those boundaries and expectations early on. And then if you do run into that issue, having those very transparent conversations with those people.
That's great. Yeah, I forget where I was reading this. And I forget, if I can remember, I'll put it in the show notes. But I was yesterday reading an article, or it's in a book, and they're talking about, how we would go out and buy a car. We would go out and test drive a car, and we would put all this time and research into it. And granted, I'm sure there's people out there who have bought a car sight unseen, but I'm not one of them, and most people I know don't do it. But when we hire someone, we'll go do an interview and consider that to be good enough, and then hire them and expect the best results. And it's like, no, you should hire quickly, and also, I guess for lack of a better term, fire quickly, right? In the sense that you want to put them through the paces. And I'm not going out and hiring 10 people at a time, but I will hire 2 or 3 people and see, for something new we're doing, and see, hey, what is this like? Is this person able to hit a deadline? Are they having issues? And that way we can really see more quickly kind of what the results are going to be, and do it in a shorter period of time. So yeah, because that kind of takes care of the opposite way too, where you're saying, if somebody's gonna ghost you or they're gonna not communicate, that also deals with people who are trying to. I did have it happen one time where somebody missed the deadline because they were trying to do a better job, and I was like, I appreciate that, but on the other hand, you missed the deadline, so that's not a good thing.
Right. It's, some people, I mean, it's a habit. It's a hard habit to break, I will say.
Yeah.
And it's, again, really important to have. And, I keep my team, I am very open about it. There's no hierarchy. So it's kind of like, if you have a problem, if your son's sick, if you have something come up, please let me know and I'll assign somebody else on that project if there's a deadline. I mean, I know life happens, like Texas right now is a great example. There's nothing you can control. If your kids get sick, you can't control that. If you have a car accident, you can't control that. Things happen in life, right? That's what it's called, life. So I'm a big believer in that. But I think it's really important to, like, have some type of reason for what you're doing. And I think with people who are perfectionists and people who are very type A and they can't let go of control, it's really important to have those conversations. And I do want whoever works with me to hopefully learn something from it, right? Like I do want this to be an experience that you remember, not like, oh crap, I remember working with her, she wasn't great. I don't want that to be the outcome for anybody, whether it's you work with me and you start your own business, you work with me and join an awesome company, like I'll be happy for you. But it's really important for me to have those conversations with my team.
Well, let's go one more in that step. So you've got this long experience, of recruiting, of hiring people, which is a really important skill, I think, for anyone, entrepreneur or not. What is something you see people maybe doing wrong that, people could, if they knew or could see, at the volume you've dealt with people, what could people do better maybe or improve when they're recruiting or
Yep. Are you asking from a candidate perspective or a recruiting perspective?
hiring? From a recruiting perspective.
Okay. So as a recruiter, what should people
Yeah,
be?
what's something that maybe, a lot of people do wrong or poorly? Like what could they do to be getting better hires?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the main things that comes to my mind is really sitting down and figuring out what you want. So yes, there's job descriptions and there's what's expected of you. A lot of times, unfortunately, what I see is there'll be job descriptions, and then when they start, hiring managers or recruiters start interviewing, the job descriptions evolve, right? And what that leads to is a really, really poor candidate experience. So it's really important to, before you even start talking to candidates or have that position out there, is to just say, what do I really want? And is this going to change? And it's okay for it to change, right? But what you don't want to have is a poor candidate experience. If you talk to somebody and you're like, oh, you know what? You're not the right fit because we just overnight changed your job description. They are going to spread the word that you don't know what you're doing as a company. And a lot of hires, when you grow, come from referrals, right? Referral programs are so strong at Samsung, Apple, Google, and even startups now are catching on to so many referral programs. So when you kind of start this negative thing with candidates and you have a poor candidate experience, that circulates. So if someone says, hey, I got this interview from so and so, oh man, don't do that, I had a horrible experience there. Boom, you've just lost a quality candidate over a conversation, over beer at a bar, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's happened before, unfortunately. So it's really important to sit down and figure out what that is. And the second thing I would say is high sense of urgency. I unfortunately see a lot of recruiters kind of have lost that. I don't know why, but just that sense of urgency. Even if someone is interested in your position and they're passively looking and not actively looking, it's important to get on a call with them, right? You don't have to do it at midnight, but really like in 24 hours or less, just say, hey, are you available? Can we jump on the call? Because I think that is really what makes you different from a good versus an awesome, great recruiter, is valuing your company culture and building that company culture. Remember, when we're recruiters, we're actually building the company, right? So people forget that. People, companies are made of people. They're not made of technologies. They're not made of services. That's great that the company has that, but without people, it wouldn't be a company. So when you are sowing these seeds of an organization that's going to hopefully become a forest, an awesome, growing, thriving forest in the next 10, 15 years, it's really important to have that positive candidate experience and have that sense of urgency.
That is great. I think that's a really good one to remember. I'm like underlining my notes here about that. But quickly getting back to people, just it's kind of what you would expect of a candidate, and then thinking about that from the other point of view. Like, well, you of course want them to know that you're interested, and you want them to be excited, and you can do that by quickly getting back to them. Which doesn't really take much, and it shows that you're interested. So I think that's a good one. We got time for a couple more questions here. So one of them, I'm curious, you've gone through a lot, it sounds like, and a lot of growth over the last few years. So if you could go back and tell yourself something from 5 years ago, or rather go back 5 years and tell yourself something, what would that be?
Think big. I know as cliche as it sounds, I always put a limit on my thinking. And fortunately, my husband's the opposite. He always thinks big. And that's something, we always learn something from our spouses, right? And that's one of the things I'm constantly learning from him. And he always says, like, why are you just limiting yourself to this much? Like, because I'm a big believer in vision boards, and I do my vision boards, and he will come up and be like, no, he'll be like, we're changing this number up. This number is too low, right? Like, we're changing this number up. This number is too low. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I was always in that position of kind of like self-doubt, self-sabotage. Like, well, I can never be here. I can never earn this much, or, and it's funny because the minute you change that mindset to I can, to maybe I cannot, or I may not, big things do happen, right? And that's something that I'm actively learning. And I wish if I could see myself 5 years ago when I was just literally like working on a few clients and working late nights before I had kids and just kind of getting myself established. And there would have been no way I would have known I was going to have these 4 businesses 5 years ago, right? Like, it's just, there's no way my brain wouldn't be able to kind of handle that thought, to be honest. They would have been like, no, you're crazy, no way. And I would say that that's something that I want to remind every single person that's watching. So whatever your dream is, whether it's being an entrepreneur, whether it's getting that MBA, whether it's whatever, just know that it's possible, think that it's possible. The minute you change your mindset, your actions change, everything kind of aligns, and you are presented with the right opportunities at the right time. But it's really about changing that mindset and going from yes, I can and I will, to no, I won't, right? Or I can't. And I would say that's the biggest thing, especially for mothers, because as a mom, when you go on maternity leave, a lot of times you're expecting that the employer gives you more, flexibility or more holidays, but you really don't think of like, hey, I can do this myself. Like, I don't need an employer to depend on. And that's why I want to break that barrier for moms, because I've done it. I've made a million mistakes, and I want to help moms kind of, empower them to fail their way to success, is the way I like to think about it.
Gotcha. All right. That's awesome. Well, last question for today. You don't have to limit it to one, but what book or piece of reading or maybe a video do you find yourself recommending the most to people these days?
I actually am reading a lot recently on like healthy habits, or just healthy eating habits, because I've kind of got into that recently. But one of the books I love, and I know this is probably a little outdated now, but I love the book by Michelle Obama, Becoming. It's one of the books that I've read probably twice now. And then in terms of like other podcasts, what was it? How They Built This. It's about entrepreneurs that have struggled. Is that what it's called? I think it's called How They Built This.
Yeah, I'll look it up and make sure that it's in there.
Yeah, just look it up. But I forget but it's on my Spotify. And every time I drop off my kids or I go to the gym in the morning and I'm waiting there for the doors to open, I always listen to like a quick little snippet. These are short stories of successful entrepreneurs that have made it to where I am. So those are the 2 or 3 things I would recommend. I've really gotten into like a holistic, happy, healthy lifestyle too, just working out and eating. So just any healthy eating habit book. So it's just like literally blogs that I will follow. It's not even a specific book, but that's kind of what I've got into. One of the things I need to be better about is reading more entrepreneurship type books. There's one, it's called The Goal, right? The goal is to make money, and it talks about how to do that. And that's been on my list. And I think I'm going to start that hopefully in the next week or 2 when we're out of this craziness here. But yeah, but that's something. And then I read a lot of books on parenting, and the 5 love languages is a really popular one on how to raise happy, healthy kids and how to form those healthy relationships with your kids.
Cool. All right. Well, we got some good recommendations. You guys listening can find that in the show notes, wherever you're watching this, either on YouTube or on the blog. You'll see the links there. So thank you, Neha. This is a great interview. I really appreciate you sharing so much of your story, and thanks for the time. So where could people go to find out more about you? Because you've got a lot going on. So where should they go?
Yes, I know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you my website, but if you go to recruitgyan.com or thesleepycup.us, and there's 3 more that I'll send over. I also have a Facebook group and a Facebook page, so you can kind of check in on me and what I'm doing. And I always have cool lives. I go live twice a week, and I'm usually interviewing either successful mom entrepreneurs or just going live on business tips and tricks. So I'll send you the link to my group as well that you can join and follow. But again, yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been the highlight of my week, because I was just talking to Adam that we had no power and or water and or internet. It's been a Russian roulette over which one or 2 do you have and which one do you not have. And all neighborhoods are kind of having the different combinations here. So this was great. And I'm so happy I did this, because I kind of feel refreshed and I feel like I'm ready to get back to it and hit the ground running next week after we're out of this whole craziness here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. And I'm glad that you were able to even be here today. So thank you again.
Of course. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Real World Productivity Podcast. If you know someone that would enjoy this episode, please grab the link and send it via email, message, or whatever means works best. Now, if you're looking for more ways to increase your productivity, time management, and team building skills, be sure to go to productivity.academy/resources to find out what tools, cheat sheets, and services can get you started and make the most impact right now. For those who want to make fast changes and want to save dozens of hours, I highly recommend joining the 14-day Productivity Foundation Challenge at productivity.academy/foundation challenge. This 14-day challenge takes minutes per day, but will help you develop or improve your daily review to get more done with less distractions and loss of focus. You'll also get over-the-shoulder directions for setting up an automation to save dozens of hours and the process for deciding what else you should automate and how to do it. And if you're serious about continuous improvement and you know that productivity, time management, and team building will impact every area of your personal and professional life, join us in the Growth Automation membership. Find out more at productivity.academy/join.